Yeah, it was a departure from Bram Stoker's original mythos, but it didn't make a cultural sweep for nothing. Welcome to my channel, KC, that's me, Carrie Chuck, the Slate Storyteller, talking about the biggest pillar in the Universal Studios pantheon of monster movies. The 1931 movie Dracula, directed by Todd Browning with Bela Lugosi in the title role, begins its plot with Renfield instead of Jonathan Harker, played by Dwight Fry as the solicitor arriving in Transylvania to close on a deal for Carfax Abbey, a property in England acquired by Count Dracula. Renfield has that coach ride driven by Count Dracula in disguise and is greeted by Dracula from his palatial staircase and is very hospitable to Renfield by giving him a first-class meal. After being left alone in that study, he was approached by Dracula's vampire wives, like Jonathan Harker was in the novel, except instead of Dracula stepping in and stopping them, when Renfield opens the door to the outside, Dracula in bat form swoops in and causes him to faint. We then go straight to that ship ride that Dracula takes to get to England. Renfield is along there with him. When the ship arrives at the scheduled port, the crew are found dead, and Renfield has his moment where he establishes that he is actually the creepiest character in the whole movie. Renfield is taken to Dr. Seward's sanitarium, and Dracula takes his first tour through downtown London, where we see his first on-screen victim, a young woman selling flowers whom he first entrances, then bites. Dracula then admits himself into an opera house, where he first meets Dr. Seward. In this case, not a suitor to Lucy Westenra like in the novel, but father to Mina. He then introduces her fiancé, finally, John Harker, and her friend Lucy. Shortly afterwards, Dracula sneaks into Lucy's bedroom and bites her on the neck. Then we move on directly to an operating theater where Lucy has been declared deceased, and analyzing doctors make a note of the bite marks on her neck. Vampire expert Dr. Van Helsing enters the picture to declare that medical evidence indicates that a vampire has entered London, and grows suspicious of Count Dracula upon meeting him, and Dracula's lack of reflection on the mirror side of a cigarette box lid cinches his conclusion that he's the vampire. News floats around of children dying at the hands of a woman in white, who they conclude to be recently deceased Lucy, and we never get to see anything of her from that. In the midst of all this, Renfield's thirst for animal blood drives him mad, and Dracula manages to sneak a bite on Mina's neck, and his blood finds its way into her veins, bringing her under his power. All paths converge as Dracula brings the entranced Mina to the dingy depths of Carfax Abbey, only to be confronted by Renfield, with Harker and Van Helsing entering the scene as well. Knowing that looks bad for him, Renfield swears up and down he did not lead them there, and begs that his life be spared, but Dracula and Mina disappear into the corridors, but Harker and Van Helsing manage to find Dracula lying in his coffin and Mina safe in the distance. Seizing the opportunity, Van Helsing splinters a piece of the coffin lid to be the stake that gets pounded into the heart of Dracula. Mina is then freed from Dracula's grip, and she and Harker recommit to each other. It's sketchy how I first caught on to Dracula, but I was first big on him when in the first grade. I was him for Halloween and wish I had pictures, but I was Bela Lugosi style Dracula. During second grade, I regularly checked out books from the Crestwood House Monster Book Collection, Dracula among them, and was further indoctrinated on the dapper, slick black hair Dracula. Move on to third grade, I picked up on the condensed novels in comic form published by WordPress, Dracula among them, and this was a major mental adjustment seeing Dracula designed differently than what we see on Bela Lugosi. Jump to fifth grade, I made the conscious decision to check out the unabridged novel as written by Bram Stoker and got his original description. Of course, that was something to digest. But it wasn't until I was 17 when I finally saw this Dracula film after my parents got cable. This was the 90s. but only about a decade ago did I start wondering how we got from this to this. In 1923, Irish playwright Hamilton Deane got licensing to create a stage production of Dracula, and I think Danielle Mages Amato put it best from her article, Bram Stoker, A Man of the Theatre, the link to which is in the description. Unlike the productions popular during Stoker's time at the Lyceum, with their large cast, misty outdoor sets, and reliance on high spectacle, the theater productions of the 1920s lended more toward drawing room dramas unfolding in well-upholstered high society interiors. So Dracula transformed as well. The character whom Stoker described as a tall old man with massive eyebrows, bushy hair, rank breath, and hairy palms became instead an urbane figure in white tie and tails who wore an opera cape and mingled with the best of London society. The play made its debut in the Grand Theatre in Derby, England, with Edmund Blake playing the title role. It was a major hit, enough so that it made its way across the Atlantic to Broadway. By then, actor Raymond Huntley had taken over as Dracula in England and transitioned to Broadway, with other actors taking their turns later during that time, such as Frederick Carr, Keith Pyatt, and Bela Lugosi. That's right, you can say that Lugosi cut his fangs on stage starting in 1927 and continuing for 261 performances. He also performed in a West Coast tour in 1928. Now, when Universal Studios exec Carl Laemmle Jr. got the licensing to film a Dracula movie in 1930, his initial casting choice for the title role was the man of a thousand faces himself, Lon Chaney. But he passed away less than 2 months after getting this licensing. From there, Bela Lugosi lobbied heavily to land the role. He wanted it so bad. While it did help that he had experience playing the role, ultimately he had to make the concession of getting paid only $500 a week to land the part. By comparison, David Manners, who had the smaller role for this production as John Harker, made $2,000 per week. Carl Laemmle Jr. was initially ambitious with plans to plot the movie more in line with the novel, starting with John Harker, not Renfield, as the solicitor in Transylvania to have that first meeting with Dracula. But we're talking 1931, under the weight of the Depression, so production had to be scaled back and be more like the Broadway play. And it's not hard to pick up on how heavily censored it had to be. The aforementioned all tell and no show on how Lucy was running amok as a vampire after she had been buried, as well as the anticlimactic flow of the climax, where we see no fighting back from Dracula at all before he gets the stake through the heart. Now, who knows, maybe Bram Stoker was turning in his grave when his creation first became a gothic Prince Charming, but it's worth mentioning that the number of those who embraced Dracula in this original form range from those who immerse themselves in classic literature in general to full patrons of goth. Probably the biggest pure audience he could have ever hoped for. And why not appreciate those Dracula fans on the fringes who know Dracula this way and still have him to thank? But it also blows me away that there was this one Dracula movie with Lugosi in the role, and his only other movie as Dracula was in 1948's Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, not to be taken seriously. And yes, he made another play tour in this time in the UK in 1951 as Dracula. But for someone who had so little screen time as Dracula, and to be so ingrained in the general public's minds as the face of Dracula, is quite an accomplishment. But that's my take on Dracula in 1931. Agree, disagree, something I left out? Please let me know in the comments section. The link to order my initial Sledge miniseries is in the link below in both digital and paper format. Give it a look, and I am still working on my number 4 issue. We've gotten some ground, but I'll keep saying it. Let's all look for civility amid all the bad news out there about social and political strife. Let's not hate, and let's consider anybody we meet for the first time to be a potential friend. Everyone be safe, and God bless.